I saw you sneaking in and out of that house. You're not walking out of here until the police arrive.
I am not sneaking around. This is my house. I live here.
So, White Commander, you look suspicious. Glad to meet you. This is a white neighbor, and
You are accusing me of something I didn't.
because you did it!
Linda Bauer had lived in the Oak Ridge Estates gated community for nearly 18 years when she confronted a black man minding his own business and destroyed her own life. She was 62 years old, silver-haired, retired, and in her mind, she considered herself the unofficial judge, jury, and executioner of Oak Ridge Estates. One Saturday afternoon in April, she saw a black man stepping out of a house she knew had been quiet lately and decided he must be breaking in. The man was Kwame Coleman, the 45-year-old newly appointed state attorney who had closed on his home at Oak Ridge Estates just 2 weeks earlier and was now spending his first weekend moving in. Despite Kwame calmly identifying himself as the legal owner of the property, Linda attacked him and called the police anyway. The entire confrontation was captured on Kwame Coleman's own home CCTV. Within hours, the footage went viral and cost Linda Bauer everything: her reputation, her position on the HOA board, time behind bars, and $150,000 in a civil lawsuit she never saw coming. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Oak Ridge Estate sits behind a set of iron gates off a main boulevard in Florida's northeast corridor. Stone-paved driveways, neat flower beds, well-kept lawns that the owners take quiet pride in. The kind of neighborhood that says, "We worked for this," without needing to shout it. Homes here run between $600,000 and $800,000. Kwame's was $780,000. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a double garage, and a backyard big enough for the summer cookout he'd already started planning in his head the day he got the keys. Not cheap, but not outrageous either. Oak Ridge Estates attracts senior city employees, business owners, retirees, people with stable incomes who had no desires for flashy mansions or high-rise penthouses, even though they could afford them. Every home in Oak Ridge Estates had a doorbell camera. The HOA made it a requirement 5 years earlier after a car was broken into on the east side of the community. Kwame's camera was brand new, mounted just above the front door, always recording. It was just after 2 p.m. on a Saturday in April. Warm Florida sun, a sprinkler running 2 houses down, neighbors moving in and out of their homes, cars parked neatly along the curb, the neighborhood settling into its usual rhythm of quiet routines and controlled order. Kwame Coleman was 45 years old. He had been in law practice for 18 years, building his career, working his way up the way people do when no one hands them anything. One case at a time, one courtroom at a time, 1 year at a time. 6 months ago, he had been appointed state attorney in Florida, a career-defining achievement, the first black state attorney in the state's history. Not appointed because of a quota, not appointed because of politics, appointed because every person in that selection room knew he was the most qualified candidate they had ever seen. He had prosecuted violent crime as an assistant state attorney, dismantled 3 of the most entrenched drug networks as a senior prosecutor, built a victim advocacy division that became a model for the entire state. Judges respected him, colleagues trusted him. His record spoke for itself. The governor had personally made the call. The state senate confirmed him without hesitation. He had earned it, every single day of it. When Kwame accepted the position, he had been living in the family home across town with his wife of 14 years. 3 months later, she was gone. The divorce was finalized quietly. No courtroom drama. Just 2 people who had grown in different directions and a signed agreement that left Kwame with the most important thing: his kids. Teenage daughter Zoe, teenage son Zeke, both still in school, both still figuring out the world. Kwame needed a fresh start, somewhere that felt like the beginning of something rather than the end of everything. He found Oak Ridge Estates through a colleague at the courthouse. Quiet neighborhood, gated, good schools within 15 minutes, close enough to downtown that an early morning call wouldn't mean sleeping at the office. He toured the property on a Wednesday afternoon in January. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a double garage. hardwood floors throughout, a backyard that caught the afternoon light in a way that made him stand still for a moment longer than he expected. He made an offer the same day, closed 3 weeks later. The deed was in his name. The HOA had his information on file, his profession listed clearly on every document. Everything official, everything documented, everything legal. That Saturday was his first real chance to move in. The furniture was coming the following week. But the personal items, the things you don't trust to strangers, he was handling himself. Boxes of clothes, kitchen essentials, a framed photo of Zoe and Zeke from last Thanksgiving, his favorite picture of his children. His son's Little League trophy from 2014 that had sat on every desk he had ever owned. Kwame wore dark joggers and a plain black t-shirt, just a man on his day off excited for a new start. He had been moving boxes in and out for just over an hour when he stepped outside and noticed a white Mercedes rolling slowly down the street, too slowly for someone who knew where they were going. He glanced at it briefly, went back to what he was doing. He had no reason to think anything of it. What Kwame didn't know was that his new neighbor in that white Mercedes had been watching him the entire time, through her mirror, studying him, and she had already decided something was wrong. Do you think neighbors who racially profile residents should lose their right to live in the community? Drop your answer below. Linda Bauer lived on the opposite end of Oak Ridge Estates, not even within view of Kwame's home, 12 minutes on foot from his front door. She had lived in Oak Ridge Estates for nearly 18 years, longer than most residents on the books, and over time she had developed very strong opinions about who belonged and who didn't. In her mind, seniority was authority. She had been there the longest. She knew the community the best, and that made her, in her own estimation, the only person qualified to protect it. The self-appointed judge, jury, and executioner of Oak Ridge Estates. She was 62, silver-haired, retired from a mid-level management position at a regional insurance company, where she had spent 28 years telling other people what to do. She drove a white Mercedes she leased and renewed every 3 years without fail. Took 2 vacations a year. Comfortable, settled. The kind of woman who had enough to be content but not quite enough to stop keeping score. Linda had complained about neighbors before. The young couple on Birchwood Lane who left their bins out an hour too long. She had emailed the HOA 3 times in a single month. The family on Cedar Close, whose teenage son played basketball in the driveway in the afternoons. Linda said it interrupted her afternoon retirement beauty sleep. She attended 2 HOA meetings specifically just to raise it. The landscaper she had stopped at the gate demanding to know which property he was working on. Turned out he had been contracted by the HOA itself. The board tolerated her complaints but privately considered her exhausting. There were notes, meeting minutes, neighbors calling her overly involved, prone to escalating non-issues. Handle with care. That Saturday, Linda had been driving back from her hair appointment when she spotted Kwame, and instead of continuing home, she slowed down. At 2:19 p.m., the Oak Ridge Estates gate camera recorded Linda's white Mercedes entering Oak Ridge Drive. It was moving normally until it reached number 14. Then it slowed, too slow for someone with somewhere to be. The camera captures it clearly. Linda Bauer behind the wheel, eyes forward, but not on the road. She was looking at number 14. Meanwhile, Kwame's home CCTV had been running the entire time, timestamped to the second. At 2:19 p.m., it captured Kwame exiting his home. The footage is grainy, but clear enough. Black man, mid-40s, athletic build, dark joggers, plain black t-shirt. He walked to his car parked in the driveway. The camera angle catches him from the side. He opened the car door, lifted out a medium-sized cardboard box with Zoe and Zeke written on the side, closed the door, turned back toward the house. Normal behavior. A father moving his children's belongings into their new home. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But Linda, watching through her mirror, saw something else. A black man, going in and out of a house she believed had been empty. In Linda's mind, there was only one explanation, and it wasn't that he lived there. Her mind went immediately to crime. At 2:21 p.m., Kwame's home CCTV captures what happens next. Linda's white Mercedes exits Oak Ridge Drive. She had been on Kwame Street for exactly 2 minutes. At 2:26 p.m., the gate camera records the same white Mercedes entering Oak Ridge Drive again. This time, it doesn't keep moving. It slows to a stop just beyond the driveway of number 14. The engine idles, then goes quiet. Linda was watching Kwame. The timestamp shows him making 3 more trips, 2:27, 2:38, 2:41. Each time the same: front door, driveway, car, back inside. Each trip captured in full by the camera. Each trip completely ordinary. But Linda's mental narrative had already formed the moment she saw him. Black man, repeated access to big house, must be robbing it. Maybe he broke in. Maybe someone let him in by mistake. Maybe he was taking advantage of an empty property. Whatever the explanation her mind reached for, none of them included the possibility that a black man could simply and legally own a home in Oak Ridge Estates. The gate timestamp shows Linda's Mercedes parked and stationary for 14 minutes and 30 seconds before the driver's door opens. 15 minutes. That is how long it took Linda Bauer to make a decision that would destroy her life. She had no reason to stop. She had no reason to park. She had no reason to get out of that car. She did all 3. At 2:42 p.m., Linda opens her door and steps out, handbag on her arm. At that exact moment, Kwame steps out of his front door, heading back to his car. The camera captures both of them clearly. Linda in white blazer, silver hair, phone already in her hand. Kwame in his joggers and a plain black t-shirt, empty-handed, heading to his car for more boxes. He sees her approaching. He stops, watches her cross toward him on his own property. He doesn't understand, but he feels it. Her body language says everything. Linda stops directly in front of him. Her posture is aggressive, shoulders forward, chin up, phone raised. I saw you sneaking in and out of that house. You're not walking out of here until the police arrive. I already called them. Kwame pauses. The camera captures Kwame's expression, tired, weary, already recognizing the situation. He's been here before. Ma'am, I am not sneaking around. This is my house. I live here. Linda's face on the footage shows pure disbelief. Her head tilts. Her eyes scan him slowly. The joggers, the plain black t-shirt, his skin. Don't lie to me. I've been watching you. Kwame's shoulders drop. Not anger, not fear. Exhaustion of being questioned in places you have every right to be. Why would you be watching me? Linda raises her phone, finger moving across the screen. I've called the police. This is a white neighborhood. You look suspicious. Kwame closes his eyes briefly, takes a slow breath. The camera catches it, his jaw tightening, his hands flexing. Because I'm black? Linda doesn't hesitate. Of course. It is at this exact moment that the camera catches movement in the background. Tom, Kwame's next-door neighbor, stepping out of his front door. He had heard raised voices from inside his house. He walks toward them with the cautious pace of someone who already senses something is wrong. Everything okay over here? Kwame glances at him briefly. I'm fine. She's accusing me of something I didn't do. Linda turns back to Kwame, her voice raising. Because you did it. And then, without warning, she swings. What happens next is captured in full by the doorbell camera. Linda raises her hand and strikes Kwame across the face, hard, the kind of blow that doesn't come from fear. It comes from absolute certainty that she will not be questioned, that she will not be challenged, that whatever she decides is true, and anyone who says otherwise deserves exactly this. Kwame folds. His knees hit the paved driveway. Tom freezes, stares at Linda, then down at Kwame on the ground. Linda, what have you done? Tom rushes forward and crouches next to Kwame. He looks up at Linda and said, "The man you just hit is Kwame Coleman, the state attorney." Silence. The announcement was in the Times News last week. The camera captures Linda's face in perfect detail. Her face goes white. Her mouth forms a small O. Her handbag still in her hand, finger frozen. The footage shows her standing completely still for 4 full seconds, processing what just happened. She doesn't move. She had just called the police on the state attorney. She'd racially profiled the most powerful prosecutor in the state of Florida, on his own property. She'd accused him of being a criminal, and the police were already on their way. This is where the CCTV becomes undeniable evidence. Every movement recorded, every second preserved. Linda's aggressive confrontation, Kwame's patient explanations, his identity reveal, her shock, Kwame's restraint, the moment everything changed. All of it captured. Should physically assaulting a neighbor based on race carry automatic jail time? Let me know what you think. The footage continues. Linda stumbles backward. 1 step, then 2. Her free hand goes to her mouth, eyes fixed on Kwame, still on the ground. Tom stays crouched beside Kwame, his hand on his shoulder, helping him steady himself, saying something the camera can't capture, but his face says enough. Kwame places one hand on the paved driveway, then the other, takes a breath, and slowly rises to his feet. He doesn't look at Linda. He straightens up, rolls his shoulder, then he turns to Tom. Tom is already on his phone, not to take a video, to call 911. Linda still hasn't moved, still standing on a driveway that doesn't belong to her, phone in the hand she used to strike him. The reality of what she has done settling over her face like a slow collapse. She had called the police expecting them to come for Kwame. Now Tom had called them too. At 2:43 p.m., exactly 1 minute after striking Kwame Coleman on his own driveway, Linda Bauer's 911 call was already in the system. She had made it before she even got out of her car. The call recording was later released under Florida's public records law. "Hi, I'm at 14 Oak Ridge Drive in Oak Ridge Estates. There's a black man here. He is robbing the place." A pause. The dispatcher's voice is measured, careful. "Ma'am, can you describe what specifically makes you believe a crime is being committed? He's going in and out with boxes, repeatedly. So he's moving boxes? Yes, but ma'am, if someone is moving boxes in and out of a property, that could indicate they are a legal resident moving in." A pause. "He doesn't live there." "Do you know that for certain?" "I've lived here 18 years. I know who belongs here." "Can you describe what a resident of that address looks like, ma'am?" Silence. Then, quieter now, "He just doesn't look like he belongs there. I'm reporting suspicious activity." The dispatcher exhaled slowly. "I'm going to send a unit to check." The call is logged. Officers requested at 14 Oak Ridge Drive, Oak Ridge Estates. Caller reports concerns about unknown individual at property, suspected suspicious activity. Note, possible racial profiling situation. Handle with care. 2 officers responded, but nobody on that dispatch call knew yet. What Linda certainly now knows was that the man she had just reported, the man she had just struck, the man currently standing in his own driveway waiting for police to arrive, was the person who decided which cases those officers' arrests became prosecutions. 2 officers responded. Both of them, by terrible coincidence, were prosecutor liaisons, officers who worked directly with the state attorney's office, officers who sat across conference tables with Kwame Coleman on a weekly basis, officers who knew his face, his voice, his name before they ever pulled up to 14 Oak Ridge Drive. They arrived at 3:04 p.m. The Oak Ridge Estate security guard had already seen everything. From his booth at the gate, he had watched it unfold in real time on the community feed. He had seen Linda's Mercedes slow down, seen her turn around and come back, seen her park, seen her walk across a driveway, seen the strike, seen Kwame go down. He had been on the phone with dispatch before Tom finished his call. When the officers pulled through the gate, the guard met them immediately and told them everything. The man at number 14 is Kwame Coleman, the new state attorney. That woman in the white blazer approached him on his own property and struck him. It's all on camera, every second of it. The officers looked at each other. A long look, the kind that doesn't need words. This was about to be the most awkward welfare check of their careers. They drove slowly down Oak Ridge Drive, pulled up to number 14, stepped out of the vehicle. Kwame was still standing in front of his home, composed, still, Tom standing nearby, and Linda Bauer still on his driveway. Officer Diana Walsh recognized Kwame immediately. She had worked 3 cases with his office in the last 6 months alone. She took a slow breath, steadying herself against the horror of the situation, and walked toward Kwame. Officer Walsh reached Kwame first. She stopped in front of him, looked him in the eye, and for a moment said nothing. "Mr. Coleman." Kwame looked at her steadily. "We got a call. Suspicious activity reported at this address." A pause. The partners nodded toward Tom. Kwame glanced at Tom. Tom gave a single nod back. "I know." Kwame's voice was calm. He gestured toward Linda without looking at her. "My neighbor saw me carrying boxes and decided I must be robbing the place." He reached into his car, pulled out a folder, and from it produced a folded document. The deed, 14 Oak Ridge, Florida, purchased for $780,000. Owner, Kwame Coleman. Walsh read it, then looked at the house, then at Linda, still standing on the driveway. Kwame paused. "She struck me." Tom witnessed everything. Walsh looked at her partner, then back at Kwame. "Sir, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. You responded to a call. I respect that." A beat. "I just want everything documented." Kwame's voice was quiet, but absolute. "I want both 911 call recordings preserved. I want the gate footage and my doorbell footage secured today. I want the HOA notified." A pause. "And I want her formally charged." Walsh nodded, turned to Tom. "Sir, you placed the second call." "Yes." Tom's voice was steady. "I live next door. I came out when I heard raised voices. I watched her walk across his driveway and strike him." A beat. "I've lived on this street for 6 years. What she did was wrong. I condemn it." Walsh wrote that down. Every word of it. Then she turned to Linda. Linda, who hadn't moved. She had just watched 2 uniformed officers walk straight past her and heard her neighbor describe exactly what she had done. The reality of what she has done had hit her. Fully. "Ma'am, are you Linda Bauer?" Linda's voice was small. "Yes." "You called 911. I thought..." "You thought what, ma'am?" Silence. "Ma'am, you saw a black man moving into his own home, and you thought he was burglarizing it. I didn't know he was a state attorney." Walsh let that sit. "You struck him." Linda's face crumbled. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I didn't know who he was. I wasn't thinking clearly." Walsh didn't react. "Does that matter?" She didn't answer, because there was no good answer. The only honest answer was the one she couldn't say out loud, that she had seen a black man in a house she had already decided he couldn't possibly own. Walsh's voice turned cold, precise. "Ma'am, you have committed battery. You trespassed on private property. You filed a false police report. Racial profiling violates fair housing laws. Mr. Coleman will determine the extent to which he pursues this matter. I strongly suggest you contact an attorney." And that is when Linda Bauer broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way people break when the weight of what they've done finally becomes heavier than the story they told themselves. Her shoulders dropped first, then her chin. Her hand came up to cover her mouth, the same hand she had used to strike Kwame Coleman in his own driveway. Then the tears came, slow at first, then without stopping. "I didn't know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who he was. I thought..." "Ma'am," Walsh stepped in, not unkind, but not warm. "It doesn't matter whether you knew who he was." Linda was crying now, fully. shoulders shaking, mascara tracking down her face. The composure she had carried across that driveway 40 minutes ago completely gone. "I'm sorry," she looked at Kwame. "I am so sorry. I didn't—" For the first time, Kwame looked at her. His expression wasn't anger. It was something quieter than that, and somehow more devastating. "Ma'am," Walsh stepped between them, "I strongly suggest you stop speaking without an attorney present." Why do some people see a black man in an expensive home and assume he doesn't belong? Comment your thoughts. By 4 p.m., Kwame's attorney had already been contacted. By 5:30 p.m., the gate camera footage and the doorbell footage had both been formally secured by the department. By 7 p.m., the Oak Ridge Estate security guard, quietly furious about what he had watched unfold that afternoon, had sent the footage to a contact at a local news station. By morning, it was everywhere. The footage spread like wildfire, grainy but clear enough. A silver-haired woman in a white blazer confronting a black man on his own driveway, her striking him going down, a neighbor rushing in, and her face when she realized who he was. The captions wrote themselves. State attorney racially profiled by neighbor while moving into his own home. The outrage was immediate. Associations demanded prosecution. Officials issued a statement condemning racial profiling and expressing full support for Kwame Coleman. Public pressure called for consequences. Within 48 hours, Linda Bauer's life imploded. Her face, pulled from the footage, was everywhere, recognizable, unmistakable. People identified her within hours, found her social media pages, found her HOA profile, her history of complaints filed against neighbors over the years, found the notes in the meeting minutes. Overly involved, prone to escalating non-issues, handle with care. It was all there. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that same evening. By Tuesday morning, Linda had formally been removed from her position. The board released a statement. The behavior captured in the footage is wholly inconsistent with the values of Oak Ridge Estates. Effective immediately, Ms. Bauer's position on the board has been terminated. We extend our sincerest apologies to Mr. Coleman and his family. Linda hired an attorney, issued a public apology. I made a terrible error in judgment. My actions were wrong, and I am deeply ashamed. I sincerely apologize to Mr. Coleman for the harm I caused. I am seeking counseling to understand why I responded the way I did. But apologies don't undo harm, and the CCTV footage made denial impossible. Kwame filed a civil lawsuit against Linda Bauer. Battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of the Fair Housing Act, criminal trespass. The lawsuit sought $150,000. Linda's attorney reviewed the evidence. CCTV camera footage with timestamps, gate camera footage showing 2 separate entries, the 911 call recording, Tom's witness statement, the security guard statement, the deed showing Kwame as the legal owner, the HOA record showing Linda had no business being anywhere near that property. There was no defense. The footage was damning. The call recording was worse. And the fact that she had driven past once, turned around, and came back made premeditation impossible to argue against. They settled within 4 months. $150,000 paid to Kwame. Plus, Linda was required to complete 120 hours of racial bias education and community service. But the financial settlement was the least of Linda's consequences. She lost her reputation. She couldn't show her face in the community. Every neighbor who had tolerated her complaints for years now had a reason to say out loud what they had always privately felt. Everyone that Googled her name found the CCTV footage. Oak Ridge Estates made it clear she was no longer welcome. She sold her home within 3 months, took a loss on the sale, moved back to her sister's house out of state. The 2 vacations a year, the white Mercedes, the HOA board seat, the identity she had built over 18 years as a self-appointed protector of Oak Ridge Estates, gone. All of it. Meanwhile, Kwame Coleman settled into 14 Oak Ridge Drive. His neighbors were overwhelmingly welcoming. Tom brought over a bottle of wine the following weekend, helped him carry in the last of the boxes. Other neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves, to apologize for what had happened, to make clear that Linda Bauer did not speak for them. Most just treated him like what he was, a neighbor, which is all he had ever wanted to be. Zoe and Zeke visited for the first time the weekend after everything settled. Kwame picked them up from their mothers and drove them through the Oak Ridge Estates gate. For the first time. He showed them their rooms, showed them the backyard, watched his daughter stand in the afternoon light the same way he had stood there in January when he made the offer. She said she loved it. That was enough. Kwame drives to the courthouse most mornings, 14 minutes, door to door. This is home. Should people who file false police reports based on racial profiling face mandatory prosecution? Drop your answer. Kwame gave one interview about the incident. They played the CCTV footage behind him as he spoke. "I'm 45 years old. I've been in law for 18 years. I am the state attorney. I bought my home, paid for it. My name's on the deed, and my neighbor saw me going into my own house." He paused, "and decided I was a criminal. She called 911. He gestured to the footage behind him. "You can see it. I'm carrying boxes with my children's names on them. I'm in joggers and a t-shirt. It's a Saturday afternoon, and she still thought I was breaking in." A pause. "She saw a black man and couldn't imagine a single legitimate reason I would be there." Another pause. "She struck me in my own driveway, in front of my own home, with a deed in my car and my children's belongings on my front step." He looked directly at the camera. "She couldn't accept that I earned this. She couldn't imagine a black man legitimately owning something like this. And that's exactly why it matters." This isn't about gated communities. This isn't about expensive homes. This is about everyday racism in everyday places. This is about black people being questioned in spaces where you have every right to be. Before she knew my name, before she knew anything about me, she saw my skin, and she already made her decision. He leaned forward slightly. "If this can happen to me, the state attorney, with a deed in my name and a camera above my front door, what happens to people without that? Without attorneys on speed dial? Without the resources to fight back? How many people are profiled, confronted, reported, harassed, assaulted in their own driveways, their own neighborhoods, their own jobs, and nobody ever finds out?" The interview resonated deeply across the country. The footage was watched millions of times, not because it was dramatic, not because it was high quality, but because it was so painfully ordinary. A quiet suburban street, a man moving boxes, a Saturday afternoon that should have meant nothing. The mundane setting made the racism more visceral, more recognizable, more real. The state health community forums, the HOA reviewed their policies and released new guidelines for handling racial profiling complaints within their gated communities. Lawmakers referenced the case in debates on fair housing enforcement. But Linda Bauer never truly reckoned with what she had done. Her apology was written by lawyers. Her counseling was court-mandated. She disappeared from public view, rebuilt her life quietly out of state, and as far as anyone knows, never found a real answer for why she saw a black man moving boxes and reached for suspicion before she reached for reason. Kwame still lives at 14 Oak Ridge Drive, still state attorney, still drives to the courthouse most mornings. His neighbors know him now, not as a headline, not as a case. He's just a man at number 14 who keeps to himself and whose kids visit on weekends. But he says he is always aware that some people see a threat before they see his work, his title, his humanity. Even in his own driveway, even carrying boxes with his children's names written in marker, even with a deed in his name and every right to be exactly where he stands. Should HOA communities be legally required to remove residents who racially profile their neighbors? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a black man succeeding and being punished for it by someone who couldn't accept that success. Kwame Coleman spent 18 years building his career. Through discipline, through sacrifice, through integrity. He bought a home he earned, in a neighborhood he had every right to live. He was carrying boxes on a Saturday afternoon. Linda Bauer saw him. and decided he was a criminal and called 911. Not because he was breaking in, he had a deed. Not because he was stealing, he was carrying his own children's belongings. Not because he was threatening, he was moving into his own home. But because he was black. In a space she had decided he didn't belong. Proof that racism doesn't only happen in dramatic places. It happens in ordinary ones, in driveways, in quiet streets, in neighborhoods where everything looks perfect from the outside. It happens everywhere to everyone, even to people with titles and authority. Linda lost her position, lost her home, lost her reputation, paid $150,000, became known across the country for what that camera captured. But consequences don't undo harm. They don't give back the Saturday afternoon Kwame should have spent unpacking in peace. They don't erase the moment his knees hit that driveway. They don't restore the dignity of simply living your life without being treated like a threat. The question is, what changes? The people examine their biases before confronting others. Do communities hold their members accountable before a camera has to? Can we build a world where a black man can live in his own home without being questioned for it? Because if we don't address the instinct that made Linda Bauer slow down that car, turn around, and come back, we're just waiting for the next driveway, the next camera, the next person criminalized for existing. Comment if you believe filing false police reports based on racial profiling should carry mandatory jail time. And if you think these stories matter, hit that subscribe button. We're exposing these unfair patterns and demanding better. Because this isn't just about one woman and one state attorney. It's about all of us and the world we choose to accept.